Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into Logos field theory, which is this absolutely wild framework that takes terrifying infinite quantum math and turns it into something as relatable as video game lag and a multiplayer server. So standard physics has this major problem, right? When we try to calculate the total energy of the vacuum, the math results in a divergent, impossible infinity. It's a literal error that fundamentally breaks our understanding of reality. But Logos field theory, or LFT, approaches this differently. Instead of just pretending that infinity isn't there, it suggests we need to completely change how we think about the universe, rendering data for the observer.
So how exactly does a tiny 0.01 second processing delay keep the entire universe from just blowing up into infinite mathematical loops? We are going to answer this massive question by exploring what is essentially the biggest glitch in physics and the ultimate hardware patch that finally fixes it. You see, standard physics treats the universe like it's a simulation running at infinite resolution, but LFT suggests something radical. We actually need to be looking at the refresh rate of the monitor itself.
To really get this, we have to bridge some highly abstract, speculative number theory with physical, experimental quantum hardware. LFT doesn't just throw out standard quantum mechanics, instead it retrofits it. It anchors our physical spacetime to this hidden, discrete infrastructure. Think of it like uncovering the invisible computer code that's operating right beneath the surface of reality.
When we dig into the underlying math, we find the master equation. This equation derives the fine structure constant by perfectly balancing the first Riemann zero, reciprocal tau, and a really crucial third piece. That third piece is the Adelic Damping Factor, and it's basically the philosophical and mathematical pivot point of the entire theory.
Think of this Adelic Damping Factor, which clocks in right around 0.2693. As a cosmic feedback governor. Without this exact, highly specific mathematical modifier, reality would just collapse. The intense electromagnetic coupling would literally force the universe to lock up in infinite computational loops. Instead, this factor steps in and acts as a system governor. It literally steps down that high-energy math, filtering all that chaotic numeric potential into the stable, predictable physics we experience every single day. The core of the problem has always been that when you try to sum up all the quantum waves without a limit, standard physics just explodes. There's no limit to how small or fast those waves can be. But LFT completely flips this perspective. It points out that you, the observer, are not infinite. You are a finite screen with a fixed refresh rate. An infinite computation literally cannot squeeze through a finite window. That brings us to this specific mathematical latency parameter of roughly 0.01 seconds. This acts as the refresh rate of your consciousness. It takes the runaway, exploding infinity of the quantum vacuum and chops it down into discrete, manageable frames. You aren't constantly making active choices to stabilize reality. You're just experiencing a processing delay. And that exact delay is what saves the universe from trying to calculate an impossible infinite sum. Let's break down how this actually builds a stable universe. The latency creates a filter. Because you take a fraction of a second to process an input, the future math is always calculating based on a past observed state. So what happens to those impossible, chaotic, infinite loops? Well, because of this processing delay, they end up destructively interfering with themselves inside the latency buffer. They literally cancel each other out before they ever reach your screen, leaving behind a clean, flat baseline of reality. Now, you might be wondering, if your 0.01 second delay renders a different frame than my 0.01 second delay, shouldn't our universes eventually split apart? This brings up the famous Wigner's friend paradox, where a friend inside a lab and an observer outside seemingly experience completely conflicting realities. Standard quantum mechanics usually just throws its hands up here and suggests there must be infinite parallel universes. But LFT totally blocks that endless branching of the many worlds theory. Under this framework, Wigner and his friend aren't in two different realities at all. The friend inside the lab simply processed a slice of the universe's code a few clock cycles before Wigner did. The contradiction they experience is just an illusion. It's caused by assuming time is this continuous flowing wave, rather than discrete stroboscopic frames. So instead of splitting the universe, we have what's called a 144.0 server sync, which ensures all observer latencies are tethered to one master grid.
Think of the 144.0 topological identity as a hard-coded, tightly restricted multiplayer server for the universe. When two observers interact, their data is forced into 144 fixed mathematical slots. There are literally no empty slots left over to create a branching parallel universe. If a mathematical error or infinite loop tries to form, the grid's incredibly rigid geometry forces it to cancel itself out. We are all locked into one shared synchronized reality.
This completely flips our understanding of quantum decoherence. It turns out quantum decoherence isn't caused by chaotic air molecules or dust bouncing around the room. It's actually an algorithmic synchronization delay tied directly to your frame rate. Standard physics says a quantum system loses its state smoothly due to environmental noise. But LFT says it loses it instantly because it passes through your 0.01 second refresh window. It's an unbypassable, built-in feature of the cosmic hardware.
Okay, here's where things get really practical. This theory is actually moving out of the abstract math and into physical silicon chips to build something called the Zeta-Clock. If the universe uses this latency buffer and the 144.0 master grid to natively correct errors and stop infinite loops, engineers realized they could theoretically build a quantum computer that mimics this exact same architecture.
It turns out 144.0 isn't just some abstract concept. It is a highly precise engineering spec. Traditional quantum computers have to fight environmental noise constantly, meaning you need thousands of physical qubits just to manage a single logical one. But the Zeta-Clock takes a different approach. It scales its critical hardware ratio, specifically the Josephson to charging energy, strictly to 144.0. It literally locks its hardware onto the universe's foundational grid.
By locking that energy ratio to exactly 144.0, something amazing happens. The charge dispersion drops to this near zero number, roughly 1.8 times 10 to the negative 15th. The background noise completely loses its mathematical foothold. Because the geometry of the qubit is physically locked to this 144-dimensional root lattice, stray voltage or temperature fluctuations are mathematically blocked from altering the calculation. The hardware itself basically becomes a topological insulator against errors.
The Zeta-Clock operates by looping through some very specific steps, effectively replacing clunky active error checking with a passive arithmetic self-correction. It modulates phase to the Riemann zeros, pushes the data through that rigid 144-cell matrix, and then halts for 0.01 second readout. Just like in the universe, this observer latency window acts as a noise-canceling filter, forcing any fractional phase error to instantly self-cancel. Because the qubit is topologically blocked from decaying until the exact boundary of the calculation, its coherence is artificially maintained at nearly 100% efficiency. You don't see the usual smooth downward curve of data slowly bleeding out into the environment. Instead, it waits, perfectly synchronized with the cosmic hardware, and then drops in a quantized step. It's a completely flat plateau. You've essentially tricked the qubit into acting like a fundamental particle supported by the universe's own master server. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty mind-bending thought about our place inside all this cosmic hardware. If quantum decoherence is just a sync delay, and our consciousness literally acts as the latency buffer that forces infinite chaotic math to cancel itself out into a hard, flat reality, then we are not just passive passengers in this universe. We are the very monitors keeping the simulation from crashing. Thanks for tuning into this explainer. Keep asking the big questions.